I'd like to bring Venkat on board now to shed some light on how this can actually happen in a corporate context. In this fireside chat, we will explore the most frequently asked questions by most GCoEs on internal innovation and understand how we can get to a point where we're not only undertaking bold plays, but also able to repeat and scale. Joining me for this chat is Mr. Venkat Raju. Venkat runs PVTM Solutions, a boutique consulting and advisory firm focused on corporate innovation and digital transformation. He's a serial entrepreneur and a seasoned corporate executive at Fortune 500 corporations across financial services, high-tech, and telecom. He's also an angel investor, advisor, and board member to 70 plus startups currently, and is also an advisor to select funds, incubators, and accelerators. Thank you for joining us today, Venkat.
Thank you, Sujita. Good morning, all. Pleased to be here.
It's great to have you here as well, Venkat. Venkat, to start off, I'd like to ask you, how you've been a part of us throughout our internal innovation journey, right? Right from building our framework, the output of which has now been used to assess and benchmark internal innovation programs. What are your thoughts on the key insights that Divya shared?
Great insights, and having worked with multiple companies globally, I must say Zinnov is up there, not just in India, but globally in terms of the value it brings to the table for corporate leaders seeking transformation, innovation, and really focused on breakthrough innovations, if you will. And this perspective is based on my experience as a corporate leader, my experience in running my own strategy consulting company, and having been a GCoE leader myself. And so it's a pleasure to be associated with Zinnov. One key theme I would like to leave here is a lot of GCoE leaders I talk to, they talk about, I want to bring in innovation as a culture into my organization. Great start. But what is really required is GCoE leaders aspiring to run their organizations with innovation as the culture. And there's a world of difference between the two. And it is consistent with the maturity model that Divya talked about. And hopefully we can elaborate on this theme going forward.
Thank you. Those are some really insightful points that you brought to surface, Venkat. Now, going into one of the key insights that Divya mentioned today on how leaders are really excited and investing in innovation, right? So I'd like to know from your experience, how many of them are actually happy with their innovation process, though? What would be your estimate here?
Most of them are very excited and eager to really turn this GCoE with like an innovation center of excellence. That said, several of them are fairly disappointed due to organizational constraints, process inefficiencies, and so on and so forth. If anything, they are seeking help. They want to improve. They want to really make a business impact that like moves the needle in the eyes of key stakeholders in headquarters. So the desire is there, the intent is there. Few successes have been there, but to create like a long-term sustainable portfolio of value creation, it is still missing.
So building upon what you said, Venkat, while there are a few aspects missing, right? How can they actually understand whether they have the right innovation process or not? What are some things that they can do to get a better view on their innovation process?
Great question. You cannot know how things are progressing if you can't measure it. And if you can't measure it, then what are you judging yourself on? So clearly there are industry benchmarks out there, best practices out there. Divya touched on a few of those things. It is at least a first good step to understand where you are in your innovation journey. How do you stack up against your peers? And what can you aspire to do? So putting in the right kind of metrics and put together a plan of action to a journey of innovation maturity is a wise thing to do. And any investment here is worth doing, including leveraging experts who have studied the industry in general with the experience of having done that for other corporates.
Right. Venkat, building on what you spoke about having the right metrics and how you're measuring innovation, right? Now, what happens is innovation is slow and impact takes time. So when a GCoE is setting up an internal innovation program, do they promise business impact from day one, that is revenue and savings to stakeholders, or would that be too soon? And if you don't focus on impact from day one, won't there be a risk of delivering no value? So what's the right balance here?
This is going to be a very, very tough balance. On the one hand, you need to project confidence, your capability to deliver for you need to get going, while at the same time managing expectations is very, very important. Expectations in terms of timelines, expectations in terms of what you can do given the organizational constraints, resource constraints, and so on and so forth. So it's a tough balance. So if you're vague and unsure about the business impact you won't even start properly. Equally, impact takes time and you want to be straight with your sponsors. So mature corporations in the innovation game get it. So it is just making sure that indeed you can make the business case properly, balancing these two factors here.
All right. You mentioned about how people can make a business case, right? How important it is making the right business case. Now, while working with a lot of GCoEs on their innovation wings, we've come across them making business cases in various ways. Some of them get business cases approved because of a really solid plan, or maybe because of strong evidence. And sometimes it's just a hypothesis that makes it happen. So it's different in different cases. And as somebody who's worked with several successful innovation wings of corporates, what do you think is the right approach to building a business case?
So there is no secret sauce or one way of building a business case. It all depends on the situation, the organization culture, and the constraints. And coming specifically to the GCoE, what is your mandate? What kind of talent do you have? What kind of functions you have? How connected are you folks with the P&L owners, product heads, and so on? Most importantly, do you have a it'll help to get someone to bring in this all together to build a business case that is. Let's give you an example. So if your GCoE has a very strong customer service, customer support organization. Now, Divya talked about incremental innovation. What that means is, through better customer experience, can I move the needle to improve my NPS score? Okay, that's great. That is what I call as an incremental innovation. But going beyond that, can I really gain some insights to do churn prediction? To retain customers. Now we are going a little ahead in terms of revenue enablement, maximizing LTV, etc. So that's what I would call transformative innovation. Then you push the needle further, garners insights to your superior customer success, customer support organization, and identify potential gaps that the customers are seeking and which your products don't do, then help create new products, ideas, and so on and so forth. Now we are really into the breakthrough innovation. I'm just giving you a ability because quite often I hear GCoEs moan saying, we don't have the customer connect, we don't have the product insights, and what can we do? But go leverage what you have and make a business case. Another good example could be if you are running a very strong analytics capability. Now, there could be different siloed business units seeking their own business intelligence specific to there. But now you are looking across the organization, you have a horizontal analytics capability. Is there any elusive insights that the business leaders do not have that you are able to garner because of your unique position here? And basis that, can you go ahead with some new product ideas, new market ideas, and so on? Here we are sitting in India. I mean, Divya touched on like 2 or 3 corporations where they are looking at India market. Now, we understand the India market here. Is there a proposition we can say, hey, can we create a new set of products for the developing market? And we are uniquely placed here in India. Can we do that? So it all depends on your situation, but to make a business case, it better be something like really transformative and breakthrough.
That definitely makes sense. Those were some great points that you brought out. Now, you mentioned how we need to make a business case. And when you're making that business case, you're promising them X, Y, Z, right? Now, who's going to be in charge of this entire function?
Right.
According to our research, we noticed that 80% of teams in GCoEs in the activity and concept stage, they don't have an innovation team, or they have a part-time innovation team, right? So I'd like to get your perspectives here. Is it really necessary for them to have a full-time innovation management team? Why can't it just be a part-time responsible?
Yeah, so there's a direct correlation between the value you derive from innovation based on whether you have a dedicated team or not. Anything done part-time or even part-time managed. So for example, if your GCoE site head is just only administratively managing these programs, but not part of his or her own MBOs and his or own KPIs, then it is not going to be successful. So this is all about purpose and intent and how serious you are. If you are really serious, then you need a dedicated team. Now, first off the ground, if you're starting from scratch, at least make sure there are people with dedicated time, commitment, and effort who are supporting the innovation programs. And it is not like a sideshow or okay, I'll carve out a few hours in a week to get it done. Okay, that never works. Now, ideally, it has to be a dedicated team with an innovation leader, not necessarily an expert, but who is has the belief and willing to stake his or her own career in terms of innovation, for example. So that is going to send a very strong signal. And then you can bring together the necessary participants, combination of business and product expertise, and so on and so forth, and create the nucleus that is required to support innovations and help the company move through the maturity model. And such a innovation management office. So for those of you familiar with how program management offices are run, where they report into the senior most management and they support a variety of business units through various enterprise programs, think about this innovation management office as something similar to that, with the clout, with the competency to make a huge difference. It's absolutely required in my mind if you are really truly interested in a high innovation maturity to do breakthrough innovations.
Adi, building on what you said, Venkat, where do you think this innovation team should be placed in the organization? Should it be within engineering or talent, or maybe somewhere else?
It should be centralized. It should be reporting directly to the site head with the necessary relationships to headquarters, strategy office, innovation office, or however the enterprise is organized. But clearly, the head of innovation should have a seat at the table at the most senior-most levels, and not build an empire, but a nucleus, a small, dedicated, high-quality team that understands best practices, that understands how best to nurture ideas, take the ideas that's coming in, qualifying, nurturing them, and progressing them forward, as well as participants who have experience in connecting to the ecosystems, whether it is startups, academia, and so on and so forth. The ability to bring in ideas, the ability to bring in startups and others, and the ability to execute on open innovation programs and so on and so forth. There's a whole set of horizontal capabilities, if you will, is required by this innovation management office. They are not necessarily going to be the experts in specific product lines or technologies, and that is where the collaboration comes through in terms of how this innovation management office interacts with the business units and so on and so forth to kind of push the agenda forward.
Thank you, Venkat. Those are some really interesting points you brought out, especially about how only when you have a dedicated team are they going to be able to focus and maybe plan for the entire innovation pipeline rather than just running singular programs, right?
Correct.
Which are not impacting innovation, which was also a challenge that Divya brought out in the benchmark report that she presented on previously. So you had also mentioned how it's important to have people with specific skill sets. Now, another challenge that Divya mentioned was how that only few employees are able to succeed in innovation projects, and not everyone is able to, right? And these skills and mindset, they're not really transferable, and these employees are not being set up for success here. So how important a role do you think L&D is playing here?
Very, very important, but it is not just the role of L&D. So let's step back a little. Perhaps when the GCoE was set up, based on the charter and the remit, I touched on analytics, customer service, perhaps some operations, some products, and so on and so forth. The people who were hired were based on certain job descriptions in terms of executing on all these functions and expectations and the deliverables flawlessly. And GCoE on an average certainly do have a better talent compared to the regular enterprises here in India, at least. That said, is that talent pool do they need to be upskilled, trained to push through innovations? The answer is probably no. And it is not their fault. It is not because they are not intelligent. It is just a question of making them aware of what's going on. So it is a mindset. So I will start with the hiring side of things. So for example, job descriptions are pretty detailed. You have a very good interview process, and with multiple people doing the interviews, perhaps there has to be a role for this innovation management office participant as part of the interview process to make sure indeed that is also a factor in the hiring itself, and that is important. What do I look for that? A entrepreneurial mindset, perhaps somebody who is curious, somebody who is going to challenge conventional wisdom. These are like traits that one should be seeking in terms of the talent that's coming in. For the talent that is already existing, L&D programs I've seen very focused on hard skills. Okay, here go develop Python skills, and focused on soft skills, communication skills, and so on and so forth. But maybe there is like a third category, let's call it innovation skills. Divya touched on this. A lot of people are technologists, and such people come up with ideas, probably even conceive a product, but don't have much background in terms of putting together a business model, doing a market development exercise, understanding price discovery, focused on like how best to do a TG, a target segment, if you will. These are all these are skills that is required to progress from an idea into a true product, for example, and having the right kind of customer contacts. So it is very important that L&D, along with collaboration with the Innovation Management Office, puts together a new curriculum in support of this. And again, somebody like a Zinnov is extremely well positioned to help construct such a curriculum.
Something that you mentioned here, Venkat, was how employees also need to have customer context, right? One common challenge we've noticed GCoEs face and bring up is that their customers are not based out of India, and usually even important functions like sales and business are not really out of India. So what do they do here, and how can they build a strong customer context mechanism that, like Divya mentioned, not only builds empathy towards customer, but it's also able to help and inform the innovation pipeline?
Right. And this is actually a legitimate challenge and a constraint on the part of most GCoEs, because we are not just 1 or 2, 3 degrees separated from interactions with real customers and so on and so forth. And the challenge here is to convince headquarters and others, saying, for us to progress on innovation, we need our folks part of those customer workshops. Divya touched on voice of customer sessions. get them into the marketing department and understanding, NPS, for example. Embed your folks into all such, workshops and teams that's focused on customers and markets and products and so on and so forth. So this is not going to happen overnight. In the meantime, even from a L&D point of view, there are things that people should be armed with in terms of asking the right questions. I touched on customer success and customer support earlier. See if you can leverage what is available here in India and spend time. I personally, having run startups, I can tell you this much is the amount of information about customers is spending time in the help desk. It's like really eye-opening and revealing. That is just one example, but it is absolutely fundamental and critical, especially if you want to do, breakthrough transformative innovations with new products and so on and so forth. You have this customer context and do everything from trainings to attending workshops to embedding your folks in relevant groups, if you will.
Thank you for those insights, Venkat. Those are actionable steps on how we can actually make it happen, because we've always heard that keeping customers at the forefront is very important. Now, coming to the last question before we start taking in questions from the audience. Venkat, you've worked with corporates for a really long time on innovation, and I'm sure you've witnessed how leaders in the GCoE construct do things regarding innovation. If I have to ask you as a summary statement, what do you wish GCoE leaders did differently and did more often? What would those be?
Please don't repeat mistakes that your peers have already gone through. There are enough scars on all our backs, including myself, in terms of the mistakes I made in support of an innovation journey. So leverage these learnings and insights and accelerate the progression of your innovation maturity by networking with your peers, working with people like Zinnov, who have a holistic perspective of what works, what does not work, based on their associations and experience in having implemented successful innovation programs in your peer organizations. So don't repeat it, but stand on the shoulders of others and take it to the next level.